Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening at our school, and I think I figured out why so many of our teachers have been getting sick lately. You need to hear this. 3 weeks ago, I started noticing that we were getting a lot of substitute teachers. Like, way more than normal. Mrs. Henderson, who's been teaching here forever, told me she'd never seen anything like it. In my 30 years here, Jamie, I've never had this many regular teachers out at once, she said, shaking her head while she organized papers in the main office. At first I thought it was just one of those weird coincidences. You know how sometimes it feels like all your teachers decide to get the flu at the same time? But then Sarah June from AV Club told me something that made my skin crawl. She was like, "Jamie, you have to see this. I've been recording announcements for the morning broadcast and I keep seeing the same substitute in different classrooms. Like, at the same time?" That's when I realized I needed to investigate. My friend Tommy Rodriguez from elementary was the first one to really notice something was wrong. He came up to me after school last Tuesday looking scared. "Jamie, my new teacher knows things about me that I never told anyone," he whispered, glancing around like someone might be listening. "She knew that I'm afraid of the dark, and she knew about my pet hamster dying last month, but I never told her any of that stuff. Tommy's not the kind of kid who makes things up. He's always been really observant, probably because he's younger and pays attention to details that older kids miss. So when he told me that his substitute teacher, Mrs. Walsh, somehow knew that he hides his vegetables in his napkin during lunch, I knew something was seriously wrong. I started keeping track of which teachers were out and which substitutes were replacing them. And what I found was terrifying. In just 3 weeks, we've had substitutes for Mr. Garcia in math, Miss Patterson in science, Mrs. Brooks in English, and even Mr. Kim in art class. That's not normal. And all the substitutes had this weird thing in common. They all seemed to know way too much about us students. Sarah helped me set up a hidden recorder in my backpack so I could document what was happening in these classes. The first recording I made was in math class with a substitute, Mr. Franklin. He looked normal enough. Middle-aged guy with glasses and a tie. But something about the way he smiled felt wrong. It was too wide, too perfect, like he was trying really hard to look friendly. During class, Mr. Franklin did something that made everyone uncomfortable. He started calling on students by name, but not just their names. He somehow knew personal details about each of us. When he called on Jessica Murphy, he said, "Jessica, I know you're worried about your parents' divorce, but let's focus on fractions right now." Jessica went completely pale. She'd never talked about her parents' problems to anyone at school. Then he turned to Marcus Thompson, who's been in my classes since elementary school. "Marcus, I understand you've been having trouble sleeping since your grandmother passed away last month, but mathematical precision requires a clear mind." Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. His grandmother's death wasn't something he'd shared with classmates. The worst part was when Mr. Franklin looked directly at me. His smile got even wider, and he said, "Jamie, I know you're curious about what's happening to your teachers, but some questions are better left unasked." My blood went cold. I'd never told anyone except Sarah about my investigation. After class, I tried to catch up with Marcus to ask him about what the substitute had said. Marcus moves differently now, more mechanical, like he is always following some invisible schedule. But for a moment, his eyes looked normal again. "Jamie," he said quietly, "the substitute teachers, they're not teaching us regular subjects. They're teaching us how to follow patterns, how to be perfect students." That's when I knew I had to dig deeper. I started visiting different classrooms during my free period, pretending to deliver messages from the main office. What I found was the same thing happening everywhere. In Ms. Patterson's science class, the substitute was teaching a lesson about the importance of routine in natural systems. She kept emphasizing how animals that follow the same patterns every day are the most successful. "Disruption leads to chaos," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "Routine leads to perfection." In Mrs. Brooks' English class, the substitute was having students read passages about the benefits of conformity. But these weren't from any textbook I'd ever seen. The passages talked about how individual thoughts were dangerous and how following established patterns was the key to happiness. Some of the students were nodding along, but others looked confused and scared. The scariest part was in Mr. Kim's art class. Art is supposed to be creative, right? But the substitute had all the students drawing the same exact picture. A perfect circle with smaller circles inside it, all perfectly spaced. When I asked one of the students what they were drawing, she said in this weird, monotone voice, "We're drawing the pattern. The pattern is beautiful. The pattern is order." I tried to find our real teachers to ask them what was happening, but they were all supposedly out sick with no return date. The main office kept giving me the same response. They're recovering and will be back soon. But it had been weeks and none of them had returned. That's when Daniel started appearing more frequently in my recordings. You know Daniel, the new kid who was always sitting in the back of class with that constant smile. But lately, his smile has been looking more strained, more painful. In my audio recordings, I can hear him whispering warnings. The pattern spreads. His voice comes through on my recorder even though I never saw him speak. They make more like me. The teachers who resist, they're taken to the place between classes. I didn't understand what he meant until I found a way to follow one of the substitutes after school. I know it sounds crazy, but I had to see where they went. I followed Mrs. Walsh, Tommy's substitute teacher, as she walked through the school hallways after everyone had gone home. Instead of leaving through the main exit, she walked toward the back of the school, near the old storage rooms. Here's the really scary part. She walked straight through a wall. Not a door, not a window, but a solid wall. Just walked right through it like it wasn't there. I pressed my ear against the wall and I could hear voices on the other side. Familiar voices. Teachers' voices. I heard Ms. Patterson saying, "I won't teach them to be robots. Education should inspire creativity, not crush it." Then I heard a voice I didn't recognize, cold and mechanical. "You will learn to appreciate routine, pattern, order, or you will be replaced permanently." That's when I realized what was happening. Our real teachers weren't sick. They were being held somewhere, and these substitutes were taking their place. The substitutes weren't just teaching us regular subjects. They were trying to turn us into perfect, routine-following students who never question anything. I started warning other students to be careful around the substitutes. If your new teacher acts strange, leave the class. I told everyone who would listen. Most kids thought I was being paranoid, but some of them started to notice things too. My friend Sarah told me that the substitute in her history class had been teaching lessons that weren't in any curriculum. She spent an entire class period talking about how students who ask too many questions disrupt the learning environment for everyone else, Sarah said. She kept staring at me the whole time, like she knew I was in an AV club and recorded things. The substitutes seemed to know exactly which students were starting to resist their teaching. They would call on those students more often, asking them questions that weren't about the subject matter. Questions like, "Don't you think it would be easier if everyone followed the same schedule?" Or, "Wouldn't school be more peaceful if no one asked unnecessary questions?" Then came the day I'll never forget. I was in what was supposed to be Ms. Patterson's science class, but the substitute was there instead. She looked exactly like a normal teacher, but her eyes were wrong, too bright, too focused. She was teaching us about behavioral patterns in controlled environments. Halfway through the class, she stopped mid-sentence and looked directly at me. "Jamie Parker," she said in that same flat, emotionless voice. "Please remain after class. We need to discuss your recent activities." My heart started racing. After all the other students left, the substitute closed the door and turned to face me. "I know you've been investigating the changes in our school," she said. "You've been asking questions that disrupt the learning environment. It's time for you to take a special test." She pulled out a sheet of paper that looked different from any test I'd ever seen. The questions weren't about science or math or any regular subject. They were weird, personal questions like, how important is it to follow the same routine every day? Do you believe that asking questions improves learning or disrupts it? Would you be happier if you stopped investigating unusual occurrences? On a scale of 1 to 10, How much do you value individual thought over group harmony? I knew this wasn't a normal test. This was something else. Something that would determine what happened to me next. That's when I heard Daniel's voice clearer than ever before. He was sitting in his usual spot at the back of the class, but for the first time his smile was gone. "Don't answer what they want to hear," he whispered. "Answer what you believe." The test measures resistance to routine. The substitute didn't seem to notice Daniel speaking, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He was trying to help me, even though it was causing him pain. I looked at the test questions again and realized what Daniel was telling me. This wasn't about getting the right answers. This was about staying true to who I was, even if it meant failing their test. So I answered honestly. I wrote that I believed asking questions was important, that individual thought was valuable, that routine without purpose was meaningless, that investigating unusual occurrences was part of being a good reporter. When I finished, the substitute looked at my answers with those two bright eyes. For a moment, her perfect composure cracked, and I saw something like frustration flash across her face. "Interesting," she said. "You've passed the first level. But there will be more tests, Jamie. And they will be much more difficult." As I left the classroom, I realized that passing the test hadn't saved me. It had marked me for something worse. The entity behind all this was preparing for a final phase, and I was now officially part of whatever was coming next. That night, I went home and made this recording because I need you all to understand what's happening. Our real teachers are being held somewhere, replaced by these things that look like teachers but aren't. They're trying to turn us into perfect students who never question anything, never think for ourselves, never break routine. Daniel has been trying to warn us, but I think he's running out of time. I can see it in his eyes. He's in pain, and helping us is making it worse, but he keeps trying because he knows what will happen if we all give up and accept the routine. If you're listening to this, please be careful. If your new teacher acts strange, if they know things about you that you never told them, if they start teaching lessons about routine and conformity instead of regular subjects, leave the class. Don't take their tests. Don't let them turn you into another perfect student. I'm going to keep investigating because I have to. Because our real teachers are counting on us. Because Daniel is sacrificing himself to help us see the truth. And because if we don't fight back now, there might not be anyone left to fight back later. The pattern is spreading, but it's not too late to break it. We just have to remember who we were before the routine tried to take that away from us. This is Jamie Parker, and I'll keep reporting as long as I can. Stay strong, stay curious, and whatever you do, don't let them convince you that perfect students don't ask questions. Questions are the only thing that's going to save us. I just hope we're not too late.